Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. This is a meeting to consider applications for minor variance and consent held under the authority of the Planning Act of Ontario. The role of the committee is to review the proposals that are before it, consider the evidence provided, and make a decision based on the four tests established by the Planning Act. In order to conduct an effective and efficient hearing, we have adopted the following process. Tonight's meeting will be live streamed and available for future viewing on the town's live stream page at oakville.ca/live. People attending this committee meeting are to be courteous and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and others in attendance. We ask that cellular devices be switched off or at least maintained on silent. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair. All persons wishing to address the committee are required to provide their name and address. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to all speakers. Any submissions beyond 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the chair. Any materials presented to the committee for viewing will remain the property of this committee. Persons seeking a deferral or withdrawal of an application will be invited to do so at the onset of the meeting. If a request for a deferral is granted, it is the responsibility of the applicant to contact the Secretary-Treasurer regarding the scheduling of a new hearing date. At the request of the committee, the applicant may be asked to provide a brief presentation and answer any questions that may arise. If the applicant has any concerns with the recommendations and proposed conditions found within staff report, this is the time to advise the committee. All persons who wish to support or oppose the application will then be given an opportunity to speak to the committee. In the interest of efficiency, groups sharing the same view are asked to select a spokesperson, and individual speakers are asked not to cover the same points as those who have already spoken. The applicant will then be given an opportunity to respond to comments made by any interested parties and answer any additional questions from the committee. Discussion will then be closed and the matter will be taken into committee for a decision. Once the committee has made an oral decision, any person desiring a written copy must file with the Secretary-Treasurer a written request for notice of the decision. A green sheet is provided on the table at the back of the room for this purpose, and only those filing such a request will be given any subsequent notice of any appeal. Notice of the committee's decision will be mailed to the applicant and anyone who has filed a written request no later than 10 days following the decision for minor variances and 15 days for consent applications. If you do not agree with committee's decision, you may appeal the decision to the local planning appeal tribunal, and the last day to appeal will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding, and the applicant and anyone who has received a copy, the decision will then be notified by written correspondence. Thank you. So we have no regrets this evening. Is there a declaration of any pecuniary interests? Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'd like to declare a conflict on CAV A064, 1435 Cornwall Road. The applicant is a related company.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Talowski. Any other pecuniary interests? I see none, thank you. At this time, I will be taking requests for deferral, withdrawal of applications. Is there anyone here who seeks to request a deferral? I see none, thank you. We have no consent applications. Our first item on our agenda is CAV 060 of 2019 at 120 Chalmers Street.
Good evening. I'm Jason Tennage. Jason Tennage. I'm from 435 McNeely Road in Stony Creek, but this is regarding property at 120 Chalmers Street.
Thank you, Mr. Tennage. Who is here for application CAV 060 of 2019 at 120 Chalmers Street? Okay, you're here in opposition or in support?
With the residents.
You are the residents, thank you. Is there anyone here in opposition or support of this application other than the residents? I see none, thank you. Mr. Tennage, this is your time. We've done our application, our site visits. We know that this is for a rear covered porch to the existing dwelling, and the only variance you're seeking is a rear yard variance. If you have anything further to add to your application, or this is your time to do so.
No, I have nothing really to add. It's just that if it doesn't get passed, it's just too small to make it usable. So we'd appreciate it if we could get that variance.
Very well. Mr. Is there any questions of Mr. Tennage at this time? Any items of clarification? Okay, you're familiar with the conditions that town staff have requested, you're amicable to them?
Yes.
So if you are ready, then we can take the matter into committee. Very well. Who would like to start?
Sure. Madam Chair, having conducted my site visit, reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as the town's written staff report, which I note the staff is in support of. Also, having also taken into account the comments presented by the applicant agent this evening, as well as questions, and we have one submission, one letter, I note, in support by one of the neighbors. I am prepared to make a motion to approve the application for a variance with the following conditions. That the rear covered porch be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and the elevation drawings dated December 18th, 2019, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the submission if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction, and in cases where a building permit is not required, that the proposed scope of work has not been fully completed. Thank you.
There was a typo, it should be 2018.
2018,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. So just a correction in the elevation drawings dated December 18th, 2018.
2018.
Thank you, corrected for the record.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay. The application has been approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is CEV 061 of 2019 at 505 Morrison Road.
Good evening.
Good
I'm
evening.
representing the homeowner. My name is Joseph from 46 Lakeshore Road West. And this is to do the increase of square footage of 505 Morrison.
What was his name?
Joseph, Mr. Joseph, your last name?
Manichia.
You're going to have to spell that, sorry.
Sorry, can you spell that?
Maniccia.
Menichat. Am I saying it correctly?
Manichia. You're
Manichia,
pretty
okay.
close.
At 46 Lake
Close
Shore?
enough.
Is Joseph okay?
That's perfectly fine.
Thank you. So make my life easier.
46, was it?
46?
I'm
Your
sorry?
address?
Your address.
46 Lakeshore Road West,
Thank you.
Oakville.
Mr. Joseph, if you give me a moment to canvass the room, who is here for CEV 061 of 2019 at 505 Morrison Road? Okay, I see none. Very well, the floor is yours. We're familiar with your application. Are there any questions of Mr. Joseph at this time? See none. Go ahead, sir.
We're requesting an increase of 3% in the floor area, which gives the increase of 35 square meters in the home. We originally submitted a design that was not really fitting the character of the neighborhood, so we redesigned a newer home that was a little bit more comfortable to the area. And with doing that, we're missing a little bit of square footage for the extra room above the dining room, and that's where we are asking for the 3%.
Okay. We note that staff is in support of your application. Do you have any questions of Mr. Joseph at this time? If you're satisfied and you have nothing further to add, we are prepared to take this matter into committee.
Yeah, that's fine.
Perfect. Mr. Flemington, thank you.
Madam Chair, having conducted my site visit and having reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as the town's written staff report, which I note is in support of, also taking into account the comments presented today by the applicant, I am prepared to, and also noting that there were no written or oral objections in support from the public, I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the application as applied for. And with the two conditions, that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevations dated April 11th, 2019, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction. And in cases where a building permit is not required, that the proposed scope of work has not been fully completed.
Very well. Familiar with those conditions and you're satisfied? All those who are in support of this recommendation? Okay. The application has been approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Excuse me.
Okay, next on our agenda is application CAV 062 of 2019 at 1347 Avon Crescent.
Good evening. I'm Doug Matthews, and 66 Main Street South, Georgetown.
Good evening, Mr. Matthews. Who is here for application CAV 062 of 2019 at 1347 Avon Crescent? Okay, you're the owner. Very well, thank you. But no one is here in support or in opposition? I see none. Thanks. Go ahead, Mr. Matthews, the floor is yours. We're familiar that this is an application for new construction with an accessory structure.
Yeah.
You also have conservation Halton note, correct?
Yes, yes. And we've read through everything, and it's such a detailed report that I don't think I need to repeat what.
No, if you have anything further to
Yeah.
add, we're familiar with the application. We've read
So-
through it. We've done our site visits. If you have nothing
agreement.
further to add,
No, we're in agreement.
does anyone have any questions for Mr. Matthews at this time? I see none. Do you, okay. I see none. So if you're comfortable, we can take this matter into committee.
Perfect, yes.
Very well. Mr. Toski, go ahead, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'd be pleased to move that this application be approved as applied for, finding that it is very much a technical variance with respect to the floodplain in the rear yard, and finding that it meets the four tests of the Planning Act. I'd also note that there's no opposition from the local community. With that, Madam Chair, I would make that approval subject to the two conditions requested by staff, that the dwelling in cabana be built in general accordance with the drawings dated April 2nd, and that building permit be issued within 2 years.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Toski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Oh, Mr. Hardcastle.
Just a friendly, friendly recommendation. I think that the staff provided condition of approval, speaking to the dwelling in cabana. There was some reference to, and I apologize for not bringing this up during discussion, but Conservation Halton staff have advised of some concerns with respect to the pool and cabana. And the variances are dealing with the existing accessory building and the proposed dwelling. And I think that we should strike the reference to the cabana as a friendly suggestion. The just to clarify that in the Conservation Halton comments, prior to the conclusion, they're advising that they have no objections to the variance, but may not be able to support other aspects of the site plan as proposed, including the pool and cabana. And so I believe that would be best to speak to the site plan and not specifically reference the cabana, to avoid any issues with respect to the conservation review.
I don't see that. Yeah, which page are you on? Because I don't see their reference.
And I have the warrants with it. They have this one comment. They have a condition.
But that's kind of like the belts and suspenders.
That would be at the
Can't get
top
a
of the
permit without
third
that.
page of the Conservation Halton comments. So given the express identification of that, I think it might be wise to exclude that specific language with respect to the cabana.
Mr. Hassan, do you have anything to weigh in on this? I don't. Okay, permit from can be obtained for development located within the area pursuant. I'm still not seeing it. Have you found the page?
Madam Chair, it's on the top of the page immediately before the Secretary Treasurer's signature block on the following page. So I believe it's the third page, the third written page of the Conservation Halton comments immediately before Ms. McCrae's signature, or on the page immediately before.
Oh, I see it.
At the top.
HCH policy may not support other aspects of the site plan as proposed, including the pool and cabana. These concerns will not be addressed prior to the issuance of. That's up to Mr. Talowski. So dwelling and cabana be built in general accordance.
I have a question for the staff.
Okay, go ahead.
Is the cabana considered the accessory building? They're one and the same?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, that'd be correct. It would be in relation to variance number 3 in terms of the accessory dwelling sizes.
Well, if we approve the variances, it would still be up to Conservation Halton to move forward because they have final say. So they, for all intents and purposes, they trump our approval of these variances, correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, that'd be correct. Through their permitting process, they would determine the feasibility of being able to locate the cabana where it's proposed at this point in time.
Okay, so then I'm fine with as it is, but it's up to Mr. Talowski. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm satisfied the condition is appropriate as it reads. I too believe that the cabana does fall into variance number 3, and by excluding it, we wouldn't be granting the variance that was applied for, and the effect would be the variance would be permitted, but if the applicant can't get a permit from Conservation Halton, then that aspect of it wouldn't proceed. So I'm happy to let my motion stand as provided.
Very well, Mr. Talowski. Is there any further discussion on this recommendation before we take a vote? I see none. Okay, all those in support? Okay, the application, all those unopposed? Mr. Hardcastle is opposed. So the application has been approved.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is CAV 064 of 2019 at 1435 Cornwall Road, Building C.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Russell Cheeseman. I'm the solicitor for Melrose Investments, Inc. on this matter.
Good evening, Mr. Cheeseman. Who is here for application CAV 064 of 2019 at 1435 Cornwall Road? You are the owner? On behalf, okay, very well. So there's nobody in opposition or support for this application? I see none. Go ahead, Mr. Cheeseman. Mr. Cheeseman, can you provide your address, please, for the Secretary Treasurer?
It's 277 Lakeshore Road East, Suite 211, Oakville.
Perfect, thank you.
This is to permit the private school on the subject property. We are familiar with the application. Do you have any questions of Mr. Cheeseman at this time? Mr. Cheeseman, do you have anything further to add to your application? Anything that you'd like to add? This is your time to do so, sir.
No, ma'am, we've read the staff report. We're in support of the staff's position on this. We see this as a very technical variance.
Very well. So if you are prepared, we will take the matter into committee. Okay. Mr. Hardcastle, you're ready to move a motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit and reviewed the materials provided by staff and the applicant, I am satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the test of the act, and I'll put forward a motion of approval. The proposed private school is located 114, proposed to be located 114 square meters away from the industrial zone, whereas it's supposed to be required to be 120 meters. The differential is negligible in my view, and the potential for impact on the school from the E3 uses, and conversely, the ability of the sensitive use within proximity to industrial uses is negligible, and as such, I'll put forward a motion of approval, subject to the condition stated by staff that the approval expire in 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction, and in cases where a permit is not required, that the proposed scope of work has not been completed.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Yes, Mr.
I just have one
Cheeseman.
question with respect to the condition.
Yes.
And that is that it's read if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed development. This is a multi-tenanted building, so that the building is already up. Would a building permit for an interior renovation to build it out for the prospective tenant qualify as a building permit to trigger this? It would?
Well, we'd have to have staff weigh in on this because that's our standard condition. Go ahead, Mr. Hassan.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, through discussion with other staff, that would be my understanding. Within 2 years of the timeframe being established within the condition, it'd be the interior renovations to establish said use that's being applied for.
Okay, does that satisfy you, Mr.
Yes,
Cheeseman?
yes, ma'am, thank you.
Okay, very well. So proceeding with the condition as stated, all those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
To get Michael.
Okay,
Did he go out?
yeah,
I'll get him.
well, he's coming in. Okay, application CAV 065 of 2019 at 3536 Was Crescent. Okay. Good evening.
Evening, Madam Chair. David Nelson, planning consultant, 382 Bartos Drive, Oakville, Ontario, L6K 3E6.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Nelson.
I have information received late this afternoon, Madam Chair, that will be helpful to the committee.
Okay, let me just canvass the room for the attendees. CAV 065 of 2019, 3536 Was Crescent. Who is here for this application? In support or in opposition? You are in? Okay, so you have questions that you'd like answered. Very well. Would you like to address the committee, or you just want to hear what the committee has to say?
I live directly across the street. We can't do this.
See, here's the question. Let me clarify. I just need to know that when the time comes, if you would like to address the committee so that I can call upon you. So you do want to address the committee. Very well. Sir, did I see your hand? Are you here in attendance for this application? Oh, no? Okay. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Nelson. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Information received as of 4:30 this afternoon, a little late to contact staff and update folks that may well have different impact on Mr. Hassan, perhaps a different approach to his report. Do want to point out that this building that we're talking about was legally constructed by virtue of a permit issued on September 15th, 2016. As a result of that permit, the applicants or the owners, were required to provide full insulation in that building as per standards in the Ontario Building Code, which included appropriate insulation in the basement. The owners of the property chose to apply open or closed cell spray foam on the walls of the basement, which during inspection indicated a deficiency and required that the spray foam be covered with drywall. That, in effect, has rendered the building, in my opinion, habitable. It is now not an unfinished basement as shown on the original drawings from the 26 permit, but it is a finished basement. The only difference between the 2016 permit application and the current application now becomes the walls around the furnace room and the installation of a full bathroom in the basement.
Okay. Are there any questions of Mr. Nelson at this time? I personally had a question with respect to the building in itself. Conservation Halton approved this bill. No?
Both Conservation Halton indicated they have no interest in the building, so that's a different issue. I think you're referring to the Heritage Conservation Advisory Committee. And yes, they did approve the construction of that building, and it was subsequently approved by the Town of Oakville Council.
Okay, so did they weigh in on the facade and all the?
All of those issues would have been dealt with. I was not party to that, of course. I've only come on stream just recently as a result of the 2019 permit application, which deals with that proposed bathroom in the basement.
Okay, because to me, it seems out of place. The building, there's a disconnect between the two old brick building and the new constructed, and that's why I was interested to know if they had weighed in.
Yes, Madam Chair, and that appears to be a concern in the neighborhood, but it was dealt with by the appropriate bodies and approved.
Okay. Are there any, yes, Mr. Talowski, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Nelson, with the information you just gave us, I'm struggling with how to use that. You're still seeking the same variances.
I think we have to, Madam Chair. The request or the requirement to put the drywall in that basement did render that, I would say, not in conformity with the bylaw. So I think we need to deal with it.
But who requested that drywall? The inspector from the town of Oakville?
That would have been the mechanical inspector, and I'm sure that the staff can verify all this through the Amanda system on the town's computers.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Murray.
So staff, so after, there was a conditional building permit to construct the pool house in 2016, and it was decided that the building would be insulated?
As part of the building permit application, there was a requirement to insulate that building.
Okay. What has changed? I mean, it doesn't, that's fine, but I'm trying to appreciate, it appears that the purpose of the building has changed. It doesn't
No,
appear.
it has not changed, Madam Chair.
I'm, if I may finish.
Sorry.
It has heating and air conditioning. I don't understand why a pool house that is seasonal in nature needs air conditioning and heating.
Madam Chair, right from the outset, that building had all those issues. It was part of the building permit application to be heated with a furnace, all of the required pipes, and any plumbing.
Has it evolved over time in the sense that what I'm trying to ask is this a mode of opportunity, basically? So they saw that it needed drywall for the insulation purposes, so then the idea came about that why not finish the basement and have it habitable? Does it have tenants in it right now?
No, there are no tenants in that building, Madam Chair, and there is no intention on the part of my applicants to ever put anybody in there. And if it becomes an issue, they are prepared to enter into an agreement stating such.
With the town?
With the town, correct.
So why the request for finishing the basement and the washroom if it stands alone now as an accessory structure and it's serving its purpose?
I'm not sure why they want the washroom in the basement, but they've indicated they do, and that's the subject of the current building permit application.
Okay.
I have
Further
another-
questions, go ahead.
On my site visit today, I saw somebody coming and going with their laundry. That does not seem congruent with a pool house. Can you
There-
speak to that?
There is a washer and dryer in that building, and it has been there since the original permit in 2016.
Why wouldn't they use the house? Because a pool house
I'm-
is seasonal.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I don't know how to answer that question, but those facilities do exist in that building, and they have been there since the beginning.
Is the owner or applicant here with you, or you're by yourself?
No, the owner is not here.
Okay. I'm curious to know if they have a washer and dryer in their own home, inside the main structure.
That I don't know, Madam Chair.
Okay, Mr. Talski, you had a further questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Nelson, why was this application filed? Is it your client that's requesting to use this for human habitation, or is the town told you you have to
The
file
town,
this?
Madam Chair, the town did specify we had to file this application.
Okay, now we'll ask staff to comment on that a little later, but my second question is, you're also seeking a coverage variance. If this was legally constructed, why are we looking at an additional variance?
The additional variance of 0.6% pertains to the equipment building for the pool pump, filter, and the pool heater.
Does that take into account the shed that was supposed to be removed but was not removed?
That is the shed that you're referring to, Madam Chair. In the original application in 2016, they did indicate they would pull down that little pool equipment shed. They have chosen not to. That is the 0.6% that I'm referring to.
Okay. Mr. Talski, you have for something further?
So if that variance were not approved, then your client, the effect would be your client would have to pull down that shed as they indicated initially that they would have?
That is correct, Madam Chair. That shed would need to come down. The pool equipment would be exposed to the elements. There may well be a noise factor.
Thank you. Madam Chair, when there's no other questions, I'd like to ask staff if they can comment on Mr. Nelson's comment that it's the town that's requested this variance.
So my last question is with respect to the accessory structure. Initially, this structure was housing the pool equipment, and that's why the shed was supposed to be torn down to replace it? Or they were not in conjunction with each other whatsoever?
No, Madam Chair. Initially, I maybe can help you with a little history here. Initially, the owners of the property wanted to put an addition on the existing heritage house. They met with staff. There were specific locations on that building that were pointed out as areas where an addition might be supported. The owners of the property were not happy with that particular advice that was given to them, so they approached the heritage planning staff and indicated that they would rather provide their additional space in a freestanding building, and that was supported by the Heritage Advisory Committee.
Okay, very well. So if there are no other questions, we can ask Brendan to comment with respect to their request, I guess, of this application.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, my understanding through discussion with other staff is that the variance is required in relation to the original permit that was applied for that showed the accessory building to be used for the entertainment and pool house configuration, whereas now the basement is being finished and it lends itself to have more livable space, hence the habitable nature of the requested variance.
Okay, so I guess upon examination of the site, you deemed it necessary that they have that permit in case that was something that would happen in the future.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, that'd be correct, yeah.
Okay, are there any questions further questions of planning staff? Mr. Hardcastle?
Through you, Madam Chair, there are two driveways that service this site. Are those two driveways historic and predating the construction of the accessory structure? Or was that second driveway put in after the structure or to support the structure? And was an appropriate access permit provided with respect to that?
Through you, Madam Chair, I would assume that the existing driveway that services the house was granted a permit from development engineering staff, In relation to the driveway that accesses the accessory structure, unfortunately, I didn't research as to if a permit was issued for that particular driveway.
Okay, I have a question of planning staff as well. Mr. Nelson mentioned being amicable to entering into an agreement with the town that no one will be using this accessory structure for habitable purposes. How do you respond to that? Are you comfortable with such an agreement?
It's going to enforce it.
Yeah.
It's not enforcing.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, it is difficult to enforce it because it would be essentially noting to the applicant if an approval was granted that they could use it for habitable purposes, but then at the same time, putting an agreement in place that says they can't use it for habitable purposes. So I would need to take that back to other staff and discuss potentially with legal in terms of the enforceability of said agreement if one were to be entered into.
Okay. Mr. Nelson, if you take a seat for a moment, I'd like to hear from the neighbor, and then we'll invite you back, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Yes, please. And you need to state your name and address for the record, and then you're free to comment as you wish.
My name is Suzanne Sanson. I live at 3556 Lakeshore Road West in Oakville. I live directly across the street.
3546?
556.
556. Okay. Okay, here you are. You're on my map. And can you pronounce your last name again, please?
S-A-N is in Norman, S-O-N, Sanson.
Sanson, okay. Okay, Miss Sanson. So,
I've been in that house for a long time, and when they brought that house forward, there wasn't any committee meeting or any general information, and I'd have to say that it was explained to me that they were going to take down because it was heritage homing, and it is a very strange shape inside, that they wanted to have a entertainment center, and they were going to take down the pump house and everything and put it in that, and also have a place to entertain people instead of going into the house, which is no problem, 400 square feet. And I think most of my questions have been dealt by all of you. It's not that I object to people. If the permit had gone through, which I didn't know, I didn't know that it was for a secondary home on that property. So the purpose of the permit, I think, is what's in question. So in my opinion, there are several people who have asked to have house extensions, to have a nanny apartment, or to have in-law, and that has not been allowed for several people. So myself, I would like to know exactly how he got the permit, and if within the permit he can have a secondary home on that property. It's almost like a subdivision to myself. But the rest of the questions have been discussed by you.
okay. Are there any questions of Mr. Sanson, Ms. Sanson at this time? Okay, we'll have the applicant respond to your comments, but we appreciate your submission. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Nelson.
Madam Chair, just to reiterate, there is absolutely no intention to occupy that building as a second residential unit.
So, Mr. Nelson, what is more pressing for you right now? That you get the lot coverage?
I don't see that as a pressing matter, Madam Chair. If the committee chose to retain the coverage at the 5%, I think the 0.6% is not a big issue. My owners will take down the pump shed and leave those elements exposed. I think the biggest issue to be dealt with is that fact that the basement has been drywalled by order of the town of Oakville that has, in fact, turned that into habitable space, in my opinion.
Okay, we have further questions. Go ahead, Ms. Murray first, and then Mr. Talowski.
Yeah, to Mr. Hassan, my question is, have there been other scenarios where the town has asked for drywall to be put up, and is it common because of this chemicals in the spray, and that even if you use as a pump house, that, you know, it's just commonplace that it's a follow-up to that procedure?
Through you, Madam Chair, unfortunately, I'm not sure. I'd have to discuss that with building division staff, as they would conduct the inspections and determine what, from a health and safety and building code standpoint, is required as part of the permit process.
Okay. Mr. Talowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Nelson, are you aware if the building permit drawings showed the use of the foam insulation? 'Cause this seems to be the source of the problem, not the fact that the town has said you had to drywall it. The use of foam insulation is considered a fire hazard unless covered by drywall. So I don't see how the town would have issued a building permit for the use for that dwelling with that information shown that they were using foam insulation without then requiring them to cover it in drywall, which in turn would have then required them to get the applicant to get this variance prior to a building permit being issued, because it's the drywall, and that's taking this from a unfinished space to a habitable space. So isn't the solution here that if you say there's no intention to use this for habitable space, but you're asking for a variance to allow it to be used for habitable space. So it would appear to me the solution here would be to remove the drywall and the insulation and put it back into conformity with the bylaw and the permit that was issued.
Madam Chairman, I think we've got a difference in terminology here, habitable space versus the issue of living in the building 24/7. I think there's two different issues there. Habitable space is not defined anywhere in the bylaw. I couldn't find anything in the bylaw. I couldn't find anything in the official plan that pertains to that particular issue. It's an unusual statement in the bylaw, in my opinion. I've never seen one quite like that. Trying to understand the intent of that particular section of the bylaw, I think it might relate back to a provision in the residential section and Part 6 that talks about accessory dwellings and the maximum floor area of 75 square meters, and the fact that it must be within the primary building. And this subsection of the bylaw, which I found in Part 4, general conditions, may well be something to prevent people from circumventing that particular requirement of the bylaw. As I say, I'm not sure how it got there or the real intent of that particular wording.
I have another question for the staff.
Go ahead, Ms. Murray.
I have a question for the staff. Can you give us a definition of what constitutes a building to be used for human use? Because I'm wondering if perhaps a different definition applies here, and that it may already be a building for human use.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, I don't have a black and white definition as per the bylaw or official plan, as Mr. Nelson has noted, but it'd be more along the lines of it being able to use for living space and the components of the building that would be in relation to a primary building and the usability of said building. And again, in relation to the accessory nature of it, it could function independently on its own as a standalone unit in relation to what's being proposed.
Follow-up question for staff. From what I could tell from my site visit, it has all the elements as such. Is the staff of the same opinion?
Yeah, through Madam Chair, in relation to what is additionally being proposed, it would lend itself further towards that, yes.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions of Mr. Nelson at this time?
Madam Chair, I don't think I completely answered Mr. Toloski's question. Given that I found out late this afternoon that the building department required the particular treatment of that basement, I don't know what the original building permit drawings showed in terms of how that was to be dealt with.
I,
I have a question.
okay.
To the best of your knowledge, is there anyone living in that house currently?
I have been advised, Madam Chair, there is no one living in that house.
Who have you been advised by?
The owner of the property.
Because as it stands right now, they have an entertainment space, because we aren't able to enter into the premises, so we're going by the drawings here. They have an entertainment space, a wet bar, a gym, a bathroom on the top floor, and a library and a closet. So for all intents and purposes, it's already set in terms of habitable capacity. And then now that this issue with the basement is upon us, they're looking to have a rec room, an additional washroom, and storage, in addition to the, I guess, utility room that has already been boxed in with the furnace. Is that the space that was boxed in?
That is part of the current permit. The 2019 permit is boxing in the furnace and creating the bathroom.
Okay.
Yes, I note it's labeled as a recreation area. It could just as easily be a storage area. But it is a finished basement. That is the key here. The other key, as you did note, is that under that 2016 permit, that was rendered habitable area on the ground floor.
And I see an electrical fireplace as well for the basement. Well, I mean, I think we've exhausted all discussions, Mr. Nelson. If you're satisfied and there's nothing further to add, we can take this matter into committee and start the discussion amongst ourselves.
Yes.
Very
Thank you,
well.
Madam Chair.
Oh, Mr. Hardcastle, sorry, I didn't see you.
Just a question first of Mr. Nelson and maybe follow up with staff. I'm looking at the definition of dwelling, and it speaks to kitchen and bathroom facilities. And I note in the staff report, they talk about the wet bar, but speak about potential future modifications that could turn that into a kitchen. What facilities are contained within that wet bar space? And are you aware of whether the bylaw defines a kitchen? And does that wet bar currently meet the definition for kitchen?
Madam Chairman, this is an issue that we've encountered numerous times in dealing with senior citizens, residents, as to what constitutes a kitchen.
Yeah.
Our most recent discussion with staff is an indication that there has to be a food preparation center. A small refrigerator, what we call a bar refrigerator, is fine. A sink where you would potentially pour water for a cup of tea or to wash a teacup would be fine. But anything beyond that constitutes a kitchen, and under the definition of an assisted living unit, you can't have a kitchen. It's that simple.
But as you can see where Mr. Hardcastle is going with that, if we approve these variances, essentially, we're giving the owner the capacity to move forward and put in a stove or put in a microwave and make a kitchen, and then that place becomes a standalone secondary living property on the same property.
I don't think that would be the case, Madam Chair.
But how do we protect?
You protect yourself by the fact that a kitchen does require a building permit.
Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Nelson, have you been inside this building?
No, I have not been.
Okay, so I have to respond to your last comment. Do you have the floor plans in front of you?
I can get one.
Please. Mr. Nelson, you said that a kitchen requires a building permit. When I look at the floor plan, I see a kitchen with the fridge and the stove missing. It would appear there's a counter with a sink, there's another kitchen counter, and there's two holes that look suspiciously like holes for a fridge and a stove. And installing a fridge and a stove in that space would not require a building permit. So, do you agree that this looks an awful lot like an already constructed kitchen?
You're looking at the ground floor, drawing A 1.2?
Yes.
I would find that to be rather tight as a kitchen. It could suffice as a kitchenette in answer to your question, but if there's no plumbing in place for a full kitchen, and do bear in mind an electrical permit required for a stove, and the electrical permit, of course, not under the control of the town of Oakville. That is the Electrical Safety Authority of Ontario, but it would require a permit for a stove. I know that for a fact because I've run into that recently myself.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Murray.
What's the panel like on this house for the electrical?
Pardon, Madam Chair?
The panel for the electrical.
What?
The panel for the electrical.
Is it within the main dwelling, or does it have it has its own panel, and what amp?
I believe there's an electrical panel in the basement, Madam Chair.
It just shows mechanical, utility room, furnace.
Madam Chair, may I suggest if it would help you, you have the ability to defer.
I was actually thinking about that. But I mean, we've exhausted so much. I was going to ask you, would you like to defer, ascertain the drawings from your client and go back with it to Mr. Hassan? But it will not be my decision alone. I was thinking it, certainly, but Mr. Flemington caught me on it. I was like, I stopped myself because it's been almost an hour that we are exhausting this conversation, and it's really up to my committee members as well.
Well, certainly, if it would help, we could arrange for a site visit, open the doors, people could walk inside and see what's there.
Okay. One of my questions are, if you don't box in the storage utility room and have the washroom, since the town has mandated to cover up that spray foam with drywall, what's to stop the tenant or the owner from just continuing to box in everything with drywall and not have the washroom in there, and they'd still be able to have that space usable in that sense?
The only matter that you would have to consider, Madam Chair, is that non-structural walls theoretically require a building permit, and my owners are not prepared to proceed without a building permit.
So
They're
the only
very clear
part
on
that was covered is the one that was stipulated by the town, and that was it?
That's it. If you wanted to proceed on the basis that nothing further will happen in the basement, I have spoken with my owners on that particular issue, and they would abide by that ruling.
I have a further question. I suspect, and I'm raising this because I'm fairly new to the committee, You probably knew that this would be somewhat contentious coming here based on the staff's report, yes?
Sorry, I'm not hearing you.
My question is, based on the staff's report of which you're privy to, coming here tonight would be somewhat contentious. And yet, I'm struck by the fact that we don't have the owners here to speak, or a written affidavit to speak to some of these things in terms of intent from the owners. So I'm a little disappointed in that regard, because it would certainly help clarify. To the best of your knowledge, is there a reason why we don't have some of that information, or the owners are not here?
No, I did specifically ask the owners if they would be here tonight, and they said no. They would prefer that I deal with it.
Thank you.
Any further questions? And in terms of their request for deferral, and if there's any discussion on that, I'm leaving that on the table as well. Mr. Nelson, I think we'll take this into committee and we'll allow the committee to make their decision either way.
Certainly, Madam Chair.
Okay.
The only thing I would ask, if we do agree that maybe a site visit, therefore a deferral is a necessity, that any further fee be deferred.
That any further?
Fee be waived.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's probably not going to happen then. All right, who wants to start the ball rolling? Let's have a discussion. Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, this is definitely an unfortunate situation. It would appear that this accessory building was permitted to be constructed in the front yard on a zoning technicality that the yard that it's sitting in should be the front yard based on the configuration of the lot, other than it appears there's a 1-foot reserve along Lake Shore, which would have made WAS the front yard and allowed what's visually the front yard to now become the side yard and the rear yard. But Madam Chair, that is the reality of the zoning. The building was, for the most part, legally constructed. I think when we look at these, we always have to look at, if you had all the facts at the beginning, what would your decision have been? If this building had come in with a variance to the size of the accessory building in that location, you have to ask yourself, would you have supported that? There was no variance required when they went for building permit, because the applicant implied that they were going to remove the shed and bring the coverage into compliance. That did not happen, and so now we have a variance after the fact. But the key issue here, in my mind, Madam Chair, is the bylaw does not permit, it is not the intent of the bylaw to permit an accessory building to be used for human habitation. The siting of this building, the separate driveway for this building, the construction of this building, I have no doubt in my mind that it already has a fully functioning kitchen, and the only thing missing from the plans is the actual fridge and stove in there. So, Madam Chair, while the applicant says there's no intention for this to be used for human habitation, there's nothing to stop it if this variance is approved. The town may have indicated they had to drywall, but that was a fire safety issue. I see the town would have no choice but to direct the applicant to bring it into fire code compliance. That, in my mind, is not a rationale that fits the four tests that I'm looking at here tonight. So, Madam Chair, I'm not convinced I would have approve the coverage variance if it was in front of me. I definitely do not believe that allowing a complete second house on this lot meets the intent of the zoning bylaw, and nor do I find it to be desirable. That would, in my mind, equate to effectively a severance on this property without having to go through the severance process. So, Madam Chair, I'm going to move that this application be denied outright.
Thank you, Mr. Talowski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay. All those in support of denying this application? Okay. Application has been denied. Thank you. We have minutes to confirm for April the 23rd of 2019. Who would like to move those minutes? Mr. Hardcastle moves the minutes. And then we have a motion for adjournment. Ms. Murray, beat you to it. Motion for adjournment.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 8:01. This is a tough one. You'd think that they didn't want to appear, probably, because they were not going to be able to answer those tough questions.
They didn't want to, and there's no photos.
Right,
That was gonna be my next one. Okay, well, you don't wanna come, just give us some photos.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I just didn't go inside though. Yeah. But,